The moment Detective Sarah Martinez placed the fingerprint analysis report on my kitchen table, I knew my world was about to change forever. 3 months of hell, 3 months of being painted as an unfit mother, 3 months of watching my 4-year-old daughter Emma slip away from me, all because someone wanted me destroyed. But as I stared at those results, seeing a name I'd hoped never to encounter again, I realized this nightmare was far from over. It was just beginning. My name is Ellise Chen-Morrison, and this is the story of how my husband's ex-wife nearly destroyed my life with a plan so calculated, so vicious, that it took everything I had just to survive it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Life in suburban Denver had a rhythm I'd grown to love. At 26, I thought I'd found my place in the world. Married to David Morrison, a successful marketing executive, and stepmother to his brilliant 4-year-old daughter, Emma. Our red brick colonial on Maple Ridge Drive wasn't just a house, it was the foundation of everything I'd worked towards since graduating from Colorado State with my teaching degree 3 years earlier. Every morning started the same way. Emma would pad into our bedroom at exactly 6:47 a.m., never earlier, never later, clutching her stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, and asking if she could help make pancakes. David would grumble good-naturedly about the early wake-up call, but I loved those moments. The kitchen would fill with the smell of vanilla and cinnamon, while Emma stood on her little step stool, carefully measuring flour with the concentration of a scientist. "Ellise, you're getting more on the counter than in the bowl," David would tease, watching Emma create her masterpiece. "That's what makes them special pancakes, Daddy," Emma would respond, with the kind of logic only a 4-year-old possessed. These weren't just routines, they were the building blocks of a family I'd never expected to have. Growing up as an only child with workaholic parents who treated emotional connection like a business transaction, I'd learned early that family meant something different to everyone. But with David and Emma, I discovered what it felt like to be essential to someone else's happiness. My relationship with David had developed gradually over 2 years. We'd met at a literacy fundraiser where I was volunteering as a reading coordinator. He'd approached me during the silent auction, commenting on a first edition children's book I was examining. What started as a conversation about literature became coffee dates, then dinner dates, then lazy Sunday mornings reading newspapers while Emma played with blocks on our living room floor. David had been divorced for nearly a year when we met. His ex-wife, Veronica Castillo, had moved to Phoenix after their split, maintaining minimal contact with Emma beyond the legally required video calls and monthly visits. According to David, their marriage had dissolved due to what he called fundamental differences about priorities. Veronica wanted the corporate climbing lifestyle, networking events, expensive vacations, status symbols that showcased success. David wanted stability, family dinners, and bedtime stories. "She's not a bad person," David had explained during one of our early conversations about his past. "We just wanted different lives. Veronica thrives on chaos and competition. I need peace and predictability." Emma rarely mentioned her biological mother, and when she did, it was with the casual indifference of someone discussing a distant relative. "Mommy Veronica lives where it's hot," she'd say, then immediately shift to more pressing matters like whether we could have ice cream for breakfast or why dogs couldn't talk. I'd legally adopted Emma 6 months after David and I married, a process that required Veronica's consent but proceeded without complications. She'd signed the papers during a brief visit to Denver, barely glancing at Emma during their 2-hour meeting at a downtown coffee shop. David had returned home that evening looking relieved, but somehow sad. She asked if Emma remembered her, he told me later that night. When I said Emma calls you Mama now, Veronica just nodded and said it was probably better that way. My days were structured around Emma's needs and my work as a substitute teacher at Riverside Elementary. The flexibility allowed me to be present for school pickups, doctor appointments, and the countless small emergencies that define childhood. Emma's preschool teachers praised her adjustment, noting how secure and confident she seemed. Miss Rodriguez, her lead teacher, had commented just the week before about how well-balanced Emma appeared. "She talks about you constantly," Miss Rodriguez had said during their parent conference. "Mama Ellise this, Mama Ellise that. It's clear she feels very loved and supported at home." Those words had meant everything to me. Building a relationship with Emma hadn't always been smooth. She'd tested boundaries, had occasional meltdowns about wanting real pancakes like Mama makes, and sometimes asked complicated questions about why some kids had one mama while others had different arrangements. But gradually, naturally, we'd found our groove. Our neighborhood reflected the kind of stability David and I both craved. The Hendersons next door had lived there for 15 years, their teenage sons mowing our lawn in summer and shoveling our driveway in winter. Mrs. Patterson across the street kept an eye on everyone's mail during vacations and always had extra vegetables from her garden. Emma had playmates on every block. The Thompson twins, who were also 4, 6-year-old Marcus Williams, who taught her to ride a scooter, and baby Sophia Rodriguez, whose mother worked with me at the school district. Sunday dinners at David's parents' house had become sacred tradition. Robert and Linda Morrison had embraced me immediately, treating my relationship with Emma as natural and unremarkable. Linda often commented on how much happier David seemed since we'd been together, while Robert delighted in teaching Emma chess moves and mathematical concepts that were probably too advanced, but which she absorbed like a sponge. "Ellise brings out the best in both of you," Linda had said just last month, watching Emma and David build an elaborate fort in the backyard. "You're a real family now." Financial stability added another layer of security to our life. David's marketing firm had promoted him to senior account director, bringing a salary increase that allowed us to start saving for Emma's college fund and plan the kitchen renovation we'd been discussing for months. My substitute teaching provided supplemental income and kept me connected to the education field I loved, while also maintaining the flexibility our family needed. The custody arrangement with Veronica had been simple and largely theoretical. She was supposed to have Emma for 2 weeks each summer and alternating holidays, but she'd exercised that right exactly once in the past 2 years, a disastrous 10-day visit where Emma had called home crying every night, begging to come back to Denver. Since then, Veronica had been content with monthly video calls that Emma tolerated, but didn't particularly enjoy. "She asks me about school, but doesn't really listen to the answers," Emma had observed after their last call, displaying the kind of emotional intelligence that never failed to amaze me. Our evening routines were perhaps my favorite part of each day. After dinner, David would handle bath time while I cleaned the kitchen. Then we'd all settle in Emma's room for story time. She had strong opinions about books. She loved anything with animals, but refused stories about children being separated from their families. After 2 stories, 1 lullaby, and exactly 3 minutes of back rubbing, she'd drift off to sleep. David and I would then retreat to our own space, sharing wine and conversation about work, weekend plans, or Emma's latest developmental milestone. We'd started talking about having another child, though we weren't in any rush. Emma was thriving, our relationship was solid, and I was finally experiencing the kind of contentment I'd never believed was possible. The house itself reflected our growing confidence as a family. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator, family photos lined the hallway, and our living room showed signs of real life. Building blocks in corners, picture books on coffee tables, and a blanket fort that had become a permanent fixture behind the couch. This was our world before everything changed. It was ordinary in the most beautiful way possible. Predictable, secure, and filled with the kind of love that builds slowly and lasts. I was mama to a little girl who needed me, wife to a man who appreciated me, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was to think that happiness like ours could exist without someone trying to destroy it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March while I was reviewing lesson plans for my afternoon kindergarten class. Emma was at preschool, David was in back-to-back client meetings, and I was enjoying the rare quiet of our house when my phone buzzed with an unknown Arizona number. "Hello, Ellise." The voice was smooth, confident, and instantly recognizable despite the months of silence. "It's Veronica." My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. Veronica never called me directly. Our communication, when it existed at all, went through David or consisted of brief pleasantries during Emma's video calls. "Hi, Veronica. Is everything okay?" I kept my voice neutral, professional, the tone I used with difficult parents during conferences. Actually, no, everything is not okay. Her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about Emma's situation, and I've decided I want her back." The words hit like physical blows. "What do you mean, back?" "I mean, I want full custody of my daughter. I'm in a much better position now to provide for her properly. I've been promoted to regional director at my firm. I'm in a serious relationship with someone who adores children. And frankly, I think Emma needs her real mother." I set down the coffee mug with shaking hands. "Veronica, Emma is thriving here. She's happy, she's doing well in school. Her doctors say she's developing beautifully. Under the care of a 26-year-old substitute teacher who's playing house with my family. I'm her mother, Ellise, her actual mother, and I've realized that letting you adopt her was a mistake I need to correct." The adoption. The legal adoption that had been finalized 8 months ago. You can't just change your mind about a legal adoption, Veronica. The courts will be very interested to know what kind of environment Emma is really living in. Amazing what you can discover when you start asking the right questions. What are you talking about? Nothing you need to worry about. Yet. I'll be filing for custody within the month. You might want to start preparing Emma for the transition back to her real family. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Veronica wanted Emma back. After 2 years of minimal contact, after signing adoption papers, after Emma had built a life here, she wanted to rip it all apart. My hands were shaking as I called David's office, but his assistant informed me he was in the middle of a crucial presentation for their biggest client. Could she take a message? I left one, trying to sound calm. "Please have him call me when he's free. It's about Emma." The rest of the morning passed in a haze of anxiety. I couldn't focus on my lesson plans, couldn't think about anything except Emma's confused face when I picked her up from preschool, the way she chattered about her day, completely unaware that someone was plotting to tear her away from everything she knew. When David finally called back at lunch, his voice was already tense. "What's wrong? Is Emma hurt?" Veronica called. "She wants full custody." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, "She what?" I repeated the conversation verbatim, watching through our kitchen window as Mrs. Patterson tended her garden, completely oblivious to the crisis unfolding next door. When I finished, David's breathing sounded labored. "She can't do this. The adoption is final. Emma is legally your daughter too now." She seemed very confident about something. She mentioned discovering things about Emma's environment here. What could she possibly mean? "I have no idea. We'll figure this out. I'm leaving work now." David arrived home 20 minutes later, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his tie loosened. We sat at our kitchen table, the same table where Emma helped make pancakes every morning, and tried to make sense of Veronica's sudden reappearance in our lives. "She hasn't shown any interest in Emma for over a year," David said, running his hands through his hair. "She missed Emma's birthday, missed Christmas, barely managed 5-minute video calls. What changed? Maybe her new relationship? She mentioned someone who adores children." David's expression darkened. "Richard Blackstone. I did some research after she mentioned him during that last video call. He's a prominent family law attorney in Phoenix, specializes in high-conflict custody cases." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. She's not just dating him, she's using him. It gets worse. His firm has a reputation for taking on cases where the odds seem impossible and finding ways to win them. They're known for digging up dirt, for finding angles other lawyers miss. Emma's afternoon pickup suddenly felt surreal. She bounded out of Riverside Preschool with her usual enthusiasm, backpack bouncing, clutching a paper plate turkey she'd made in art class. She chattered about how Marcus had shared his goldfish crackers and how they learned about different kinds of clouds, completely innocent of the storm gathering around her. "Look, Mama, Miss Rodriguez said mine was the most creative because I gave him rainbow feathers." She thrust the turkey toward me, beaming with pride. "It's beautiful, sweetheart, just like everything you make." I managed to keep my voice steady, but inside I was screaming. How could someone look at this happy, secured child and decide to destroy her world for, what, revenge? Control? Some twisted sense of ownership? That evening, after Emma was asleep, David and I made the calls we'd been dreading. First to David's lawyer, Patricia Wells, who'd handled our adoption proceedings. Patricia listened grimly to our summary of Veronica's call. "She's going to have an uphill battle," Patricia said, but her tone wasn't as reassuring as her words. "The adoption is final, Emma has been thriving in your care, and Veronica voluntarily relinquished her parental rights. But what? If she's retained Richard Blackstone's firm, they're going to look for any possible angle. They'll scrutinize every aspect of your lives, looking for something, anything that could be construed as harmful to Emma's well-being. They'll investigate your finances, your relationships, your social media presence, your work history. They'll interview Emma's teachers, your neighbors, anyone who might have observed your family dynamic." My stomach clenched. "And if they don't find anything?" Patricia's pause was telling. "In my experience, when Blackstone's firm takes a case like this, they usually find something, whether it exists or not." The implications hung in the air like smoke. David reached for my hand across the table, his fingers cold and rigid. "What do we do?" I asked. "Document everything. Every interaction Emma has, every milestone she reaches, every sign of happiness and stability. Create a paper trail that shows beyond doubt that she's thriving with you, and prepare for them to try to create evidence that suggests otherwise." After hanging up with Patricia, David and I sat in our living room, staring at Emma's blanket fort, her books scattered on the coffee table, the family photos that told the story of our life together. Everything that had felt permanent and secure 12 hours ago now felt fragile, temporary. Why now? Why is she doing this now? David pulled me closer on the couch. "I don't know. Maybe she's having regrets. Maybe this new guy is pushing her to fight for Emma. Maybe she's just realized that losing custody made her look bad to other people. Or maybe she's jealous that Emma calls me Mama. Whatever her reason, we're not going to let her destroy our family." But even as David said those words, I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. We were about to enter a battle we'd never wanted, against an opponent who apparently had no limits on what she was willing to do to win. That night, I lay awake listening to Emma's soft breathing through the baby monitor, wondering if these peaceful moments were numbered. Somewhere in Phoenix, Veronica Castillo was planning our destruction, and I had no idea what weapons she intended to use against us. The catalyst had been triggered. Our world was about to change in ways we couldn't imagine, and all I could do was hold tight to the family we'd built and hope it would be strong enough to survive what was coming. The war for Emma had begun. The custody papers arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered by a professional process server who looked apologetic as he handed me the thick manila envelope. Emma was at a playdate with the Thompson twins, giving me the small mercy of receiving this blow without her witnessing my reaction. My hands trembled as I read the legal documents. Veronica wasn't just requesting custody. She was painting me as an unfit guardian who had manipulated her way into Emma's life during a vulnerable time.
The petition claimed that Emma's true mother had been coerced into signing adoption papers while dealing with post-divorce trauma, and that the child was now suffering in an unstable environment with an inexperienced caregiver. The character assassination was breathtaking in its thoroughness. According to the filing, I was a young woman with limited life experience and no biological children who had disrupted the natural mother-daughter bond. It suggested that Emma's development was being compromised by inadequate supervision and emotional guidance from someone ill-equipped to handle the complexities of child-rearing. But it was the final paragraph that made my blood run cold. The petition referenced emerging evidence of substance abuse and reckless behavior that placed Emma in immediate danger. It requested emergency temporary custody pending a full investigation into the toxic environment Emma was allegedly living in. Substance abuse? I'd never used illegal drugs in my life. I barely drank wine with dinner. Where was this coming from? David arrived home to find me sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by legal papers, tears streaming down my face. He read the documents in silence, his jaw tightening with each page. "This is insane," he finally said. "Every word of this is a lie. You're the best thing that ever happened to Emma." "But look at how it's written, David. It sounds so official, so convincing. What if the judge believes her?" "No judge is going to believe this garbage. We have 2 years of documentation showing Emma is thriving. Her pediatric records, school reports, testimonials from teachers. What about the substance abuse allegation? How do we prove a negative? How do I prove I don't use drugs?" David's face went pale as the implications hit him. "They're going to request drug testing. Hair follicle tests, blood work, urinalysis. They'll make you jump through every hoop they can think of." The next 2 weeks became a crash course in legal warfare. Patricia Wells worked around the clock preparing our response, gathering evidence of Emma's well-being under our care. We documented everything: Emma's perfect attendance at preschool, her advanced vocabulary, her social development milestones. We collected letters from neighbors, teachers, even our mailman, all testifying to the loving, stable environment we provided. But for every piece of positive evidence we compiled, another obstacle appeared. The court appointed a guardian ad litem, an attorney named James Morrison, no relation to David despite the shared surname. He was a stern man in his 60s who seemed to view our entire family dynamic with deep suspicion. "I need to understand the timeline here," Morrison said during our first meeting in his sterile downtown office. "Miss Chen-Morrison, you entered this child's life when she was barely 2 years old. That's an impressionable age. How do we know Emma's attachment to you isn't simply the result of consistent presence rather than genuine maternal bonding?" I felt like I was being interrogated for the crime of loving a child who needed me. Emma was already calling me mama before we even discussed adoption. The attachment developed naturally, or deliberately cultivated on your part. Morrison's pen scratched against his legal pad. Young women often romanticize the idea of instant motherhood without understanding the psychological complexities involved. David leaned forward. "With all due respect, Mr. Morrison, my daughter has never been happier or more secure than she is with Ellise. Her teachers, her doctor, our family, everyone can attest to that. Yet her biological mother claims she was pressured into relinquishing parental rights during a vulnerable time. She states that she was led to believe it was temporary, that she could reclaim her daughter when her circumstances improved. That's completely false," I said. But Morrison had already moved on to his next question. The court ordered a comprehensive home study, which meant allowing a social worker named Carmen Rodriguez into our most private spaces. She arrived on a Tuesday morning with a clipboard and an expression that suggested she'd already made her mind about us. "I'll need to inspect the entire house," Rodriguez announced, walking through our front door without waiting for invitation, "including closets, cabinets, anywhere a child might access inappropriate materials or substances." She photographed Emma's room, noting the excessive number of toys and questioning whether we were attempting to buy the child's affection. She criticized our kitchen for having knives within theoretical reach of a 4-year-old, despite the child safety locks we had installed. She frowned at our family photos in the hallway, asking pointed questions about why there were so few images of Emma with her real mother.
Veronica rarely visits, David explained. These photos represent Emma's actual daily life. Rodriguez made a note. The biological mother claims she was discouraged from maintaining regular contact. It was like arguing with someone who had already decided we were guilty. Every explanation we offered was met with skepticism. Every piece of evidence reframed as potential manipulation. The drug testing began the following week. I submitted to urine analysis, blood draws, and hair follicle testing, each procedure feeling more humiliating than the last. The technicians treated me like a suspected criminal, following protocols designed for people with substance abuse histories. These tests will show everything from the past 90 days, the lab technician explained while collecting hair samples. Cocaine, marijuana, opiates, amphetamines, everything. I wanted to scream that I'd never touched any of those substances, that the most rebellious thing I'd ever done was drink too much wine at David's office Christmas party. But I submitted to each test, knowing that resistance would only fuel more suspicion. Emma began showing signs of stress that broke my heart. She'd started having nightmares, waking up crying about bad people who wanted to take her away. During the day, she clung to me with unusual desperation, asking repeatedly if I was going to leave her. "Mama, are you going away like Sarah's mama did?" she asked one morning while we made pancakes. Sarah was a child from her preschool whose mother had left the family the previous year. "No, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere," I assured her, but the words felt hollow. How could I make promises when I had no control over what might happen? Emma's behavioral changes didn't go unnoticed. Miss Rodriguez at the preschool pulled me aside one afternoon to express concern about Emma's increased anxiety and regression in some developmental areas. "She's been asking to call you multiple times during the day. She seems afraid you won't be there when I pick her up. Has something changed at home?" I couldn't explain the custody battle to a preschool teacher, couldn't burden Emma's educational environment with our legal crisis. We're going through some family stress right now. It should resolve soon. But would it resolve? Each day brought new demands from Veronica's legal team. They wanted financial records going back 5 years, employment histories, medical records, social media archives. They requested interviews with everyone who had ever been alone with Emma, treating routine babysitting arrangements like potential evidence of negligence. The most painful part was watching David struggle with guilt. He blamed himself for bringing Veronica into our lives, for having a child with someone who could be so vindictive. He worked longer hours to pay for legal fees, came home exhausted and defeated, and spent his evenings poring over documents instead of reading bedtime stories to Emma. "This is destroying our family," he said one night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, which is exactly what she wants. "We can't let her win," I replied. But even as I said the words, I wondered if we were fighting a battle we couldn't possibly win. How do you prove you're a good mother when someone is determined to paint you as dangerous? How do you defend against accusations that exist only in the mind of someone who wants to hurt you? The resistance felt overwhelming, like trying to hold back an avalanche with bare hands. Every legal maneuver we made was met with 3 more from Veronica's team. Every piece of evidence we presented was challenged, dissected, reinterpreted through the lens of suspicion. As we prepared for the custody evaluation that would determine Emma's future, I felt the weight of impossibility settling over us. We were fighting not just for legal custody, but for the right to love a child who had become my daughter in every way that mattered. And despite all our evidence, all our documentation, all our love, I was beginning to fear it might not be enough. The system that was supposed to protect Emma's best interest seemed determined to tear apart the only family she'd ever truly known. And somewhere in Phoenix, California, Veronica Castillo was counting on exactly that. The first victory came in an unexpected form. a clean drug test result that arrived via email at 7:23 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. As I stare at the laboratory report, showing absolutely no trace of any controlled substances in my system, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. David was already at the gym when the email came through, so I called him immediately, my voice shaking with relief. All tests came back completely clean. Hair, blood, urine, everything. I knew they would, he said, but I could hear his own relief. Now we have concrete evidence that their substance abuse allegations are completely fabricated. Patricia Wells was equally pleased when I forwarded the results to her. "This is exactly what we needed," she said during our morning phone call. "It doesn't just prove the allegations false, it demonstrates the malicious nature of their claims. No legitimate concern would have resulted in these accusations." But our celebration was short-lived. Later that same day, Patricia called with troubling news. "Veronica's team is already spinning the clean results. They're claiming the tests prove you were warned in advance and had time to cleanse your system. They're requesting additional testing and suggesting the original allegations were based on credible witness accounts of erratic behavior." The audacity was breathtaking, but it also revealed something important. They were making moves based on desperation, not evidence. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we might actually have a fighting chance. Emma's therapist, Dr. Ellise Chen, became our unexpected ally in ways I hadn't anticipated. David had insisted we get Emma counseling to help her process the stress she was experiencing, but Dr. Chen proved to be far more than just emotional support for our daughter. "I've been working with children and families for over 15 years, Dr. Chen told me during one of our sessions. Emma's attachment to you is genuine, healthy, and strong. In cases of manufactured attachment, which is what opposing counsel seems to be suggesting, I would see very different behavioral patterns." "What kind of patterns?" "Anxiety around the attachment figure, compliance-based rather than genuine affection, developmental delays or regressions that suggest emotional confusion. Emma shows none of these indicators. Her stress is entirely related to the uncertainty of the current situation, not her relationship with you." Dr. Chen agreed to testify on our behalf, and her credentials were impeccable. Child psychology PhD from Stanford, published researcher, expert witness in over 100 custody cases. Her assessment of Emma's well-being under our care would carry significant weight with the court. The breakthrough came when I decided to take a more active role in our defense strategy. Instead of just responding to Veronica's attacks, I began documenting positive evidence in real time. I started recording Emma's daily activities, her spontaneous expressions of happiness, her developmental achievements. One evening, while Emma was building an elaborate castle with her blocks, I captured video of her explaining her architectural choices. "This is where the princess lives, and this is where her mama makes pancakes, and this part is for the library because princesses need lots of books." The unconscious way she integrated our family dynamic into her imaginative play was exactly the kind of evidence that could speak louder than any expert testimony. I also began reaching out to build a broader support network. Emma's pediatrician, Dr. Michael Rodriguez, had been tracking her development since birth and was appalled when I explained our situation. "Emma is one of the healthiest, most well-adjusted children in my practice. Her growth charts are perfect, her vaccination schedule has never been missed, and she displays advanced social and emotional development for her age group. I've noted in her file multiple times how responsive and attentive you are as her primary caregiver." He agreed to provide detailed medical records and testimony about Emma's thriving physical and emotional health under our care. More importantly, he offered insights into the potential trauma that removing Emma from our home could cause. At her age, forced separation from primary attachment figures can result in long-term developmental disruption. We're talking about potential anxiety disorders, attachment difficulties, even developmental regression. The courts need to understand that this isn't just about legal custody. It's about a child's psychological well-being. The school district rallied around us in ways I hadn't expected. The principal at Riverside Elementary, Mrs. Sandra Williams, had observed Emma during various school events and activities. She provided a letter detailing Emma's confident social interactions, her advanced language skills, and her obvious security in family relationships.
Emma frequently mentions family activities and demonstrates clear pride in her home environment. Children who are struggling at home typically display behavioral indicators at school. Emma shows none of these warning signs.
My substitute teaching colleagues became an unexpected source of strength and evidence. They had observed me interacting with children professionally for years, noting my patience, skill, and genuine care for child development. Several offered to testify about my character and my natural ability with children. "You're one of the most intuitive teachers I've worked with," said Janet Morrison, the kindergarten team leader at Riverside. "Children gravitate toward you because you understand their needs instinctively. That's not something you can fake or manufacture." David and I also began working more strategically with our legal team. Instead of just reacting to Veronica's moves, we started anticipating them and preparing counter strategies. Patricia suggested we hire a private investigator to research Veronica's current living situation and verify her claims about being in a stable relationship and improved financial position. The investigator, Marcus Thompson, was a former police detective who specialized in custody cases. His initial report was illuminating. Veronica's serious relationship with attorney Richard Blackstone was actually a professional arrangement that had recently turned personal. Her promotion at work was legitimate, but it came with a transfer requirement that would move Emma to a different state within 6 months if custody changed. "She's not just trying to reclaim her daughter," Marcus explained during his briefing. "She's planning to relocate Emma across state lines, which would effectively end your visitation rights and make future custody modifications nearly impossible." This revelation changed our entire strategy. We could argue that Veronica's true motivation wasn't Emma's well-being, but rather a desire to permanently separate Emma from the family she'd known for years. The planned relocation demonstrated that this wasn't about providing better care. It was about control and punishment. Emma herself provided some of our most compelling evidence, though she was unaware of it. During one of her sessions with Dr. Chen, she drew pictures of our family and explained each figure's role in her life. Her drawings consistently showed herself between David and me, with all 3 figures smiling and connected. "Tell me about this picture," Dr. Chen had said, pointing to Emma's latest artwork. "That's my daddy, and that's my mama, and that's me. We're making pancakes together because that's what families do. My daddy helps me measure, and my mama helps me flip them, and I help eat them all up." Emma's giggle was captured on Dr. Chen's recording equipment, providing audio evidence of her genuine happiness and security. We also started building a timeline of Veronica's involvement in Emma's life, documenting every missed call, every canceled visit, every time she'd chosen her own priorities over spending time with Emma. The pattern was clear. Veronica had been an absent parent by choice, not circumstance. "This is crucial evidence," Patricia explained. "It shows that her sudden interest in full custody isn't based on a long-standing desire to be involved in Emma's life. It's a recent development that coincides with her new relationship and career advancement." The momentum was shifting in our favor, but we knew the real test would come during the formal custody evaluation. Still, for the first time since receiving those initial papers, I felt like we were fighting back effectively, rather than just defending desperately. Emma was beginning to show signs of her old resilience, too. Her nightmares were becoming less frequent, and she'd started building elaborate block structures again, something she'd stopped doing during the worst of her anxiety. She was still clingy, but she was also laughing more, asking for extra stories at bedtime, and showing interest in planning summer activities. "Are we still going to have a garden this year, Mama? I want to grow the big tomatoes like Mrs. Patterson." "Of course we are, sweetheart. We'll plant everything just like we planned." As I said those words, I actually believed them. We were going to have a garden this summer. We were going to continue being a family. For the first time in weeks, the future felt possible again. The fight was far from over, but we were no longer just surviving it, we were winning it. The trap was sprung on a Thursday morning that started like any other. Emma and I were in our usual pancake-making routine when the doorbell rang at exactly 8:15 a.m. 30 minutes before I was supposed to drive Emma to preschool. Through the peephole, I saw two uniformed police officers standing on our porch, their expressions serious and official. My heart hammered as I opened the door, Emma still clinging to my leg with flour-dusted hands. "Officers? Is there a problem?" The older officer, Sergeant Williams, according to his badge, consulted a small notebook. "Ma'am, we need to search your vehicle as part of an ongoing child welfare investigation. We have a warrant." He handed me official paperwork, while his partner, Officer Martinez, walked toward my silver Honda CR-V parked in the driveway. Emma pressed closer to me, sensing the tension, even if she didn't understand what was happening. "I don't understand," I said, scanning the warrant with trembling hands. "What are you looking for?" "The warrant specifies controlled substances and drug paraphernalia," Sergeant Williams said. "We received a tip from a concerned party about possible illegal activity at this residence." A concerned party. Even before he finished speaking, I knew exactly who had made that call. Emma started crying as the officers began their search, their methodical examination of my car turning our peaceful morning into a nightmare. I held her close, whispering reassurances, while my mind raced. There was nothing illegal in my car. There couldn't be. I'd never used drugs, barely drink alcohol, didn't even keep prescription medication beyond basic ibuprofen. 20 minutes later, Officer Martinez emerged from my vehicle, holding a clear plastic bag containing what looked like a small Ziploc baggie filled with white powder. "Found this wedged under the driver's seat," he announced, his voice carrying across our quiet neighborhood. I noticed Mrs. Patterson peeking through her curtains, and the Thompson twins' mother had paused her morning jog to stare openly at the scene unfolding in our driveway. "That's not mine," I said immediately, my voice rising in panic. "I've never seen that before in my life. Someone must have planted it there." Sergeant Williams had heard this denial before. His expression remained professionally neutral as he read me my rights. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. You have the right to remain silent." The words became background noise as my world collapsed around me. Emma was screaming now, reaching for me as a neighbor I had called rushed over to take her. "Mama, don't go! Mama!" "It's okay, sweetheart," I called out as they placed handcuffs around my wrists. "Daddy will come get you. I'll be home soon. I love you." But even as I said the words, I knew nothing would ever be okay again. The processing at the Denver County Jail was a humiliating blur of fingerprinting, mugshots, and paperwork. I was placed in a holding cell with 3 other women, all of whom seemed to know exactly what to expect from the system that was devouring me alive. I sat on the metal bench, still wearing my pancake-making clothes, trying to process what had just happened. David arrived 6 hours later with Patricia Wells and enough cash for bail. His face was haggard, aged by years in the span of a morning. He said the charges are possession of cocaine, about 3 grams, which thankfully keeps it at misdemeanor level, but still. "David, I swear to you, I have never touched cocaine in my life. Someone planted that in my car." "I know." His voice was hollow. "But it doesn't matter what we know. It matters what we can prove." Patricia was equally grim. "This changes everything. Veronica's team will use this arrest to request emergency custody. They'll argue that Emma is in immediate danger living with someone who's been charged with drug possession. But the charges are false. Proving that won't happen overnight. In the meantime, Emma could be removed from your home and placed with Veronica pending trial. Once that happens, reversing it becomes exponentially more difficult." When we arrived home, Emma ran to me with desperate relief, but her joy was short-lived. Within an hour, Carmen Rodriguez, the social worker, was back at our door with new paperwork and a changed attitude. I'm here to conduct an emergency welfare assessment, Rodriguez announced, no longer bothering with pleasantries. Given this morning's arrest, the state has serious concerns about the child's safety in this environment. She interviewed Emma separately, asking leading questions about whether I had ever given her special medicine or if there were times when I acted different or scary. Emma, confused and still traumatized by the morning's events, broke down crying and couldn't provide coherent answers to any of the questions.
The child appears highly distressed, Rodriguez noted in her report, unable to communicate clearly about home environment, shows signs of potential psychological trauma. Every word she wrote was another nail in our coffin. Emma's tears, caused by the stress of watching me get arrested, were being reframed as evidence of ongoing abuse or neglect. The news spread through our neighborhood like wildfire. By evening, I could see the changed dynamics in every interaction. Mrs. Patterson, who had always waved cheerfully from her garden, now averted her eyes when she saw me. The Thompson twins' mother abruptly ended a conversation when I approached, gathering her children protectively and hurrying inside. "They think I'm a drug dealer," I said to David that night, watching our neighbors' reactions through our kitchen window. "Everyone who saw the arrest this morning thinks I'm exactly what Veronica said I was." David pulled me away from the window. "We'll prove your innocence. Patricia is already working on getting the evidence analyzed independently. If someone planted that cocaine, there will be forensic proof." But the damage was accelerating faster than our ability to control it. The next morning, Emma's preschool called to request an immediate conference about her continued enrollment. Miss Rodriguez, Emma's beloved teacher, could barely make eye contact with me when I arrived. "The school board has concerns," she said carefully. "With the ongoing legal situation and yesterday's incident, they feel it might be best if Emma takes some time away from school until things are resolved." Emma was being punished for my alleged crimes. She was losing her routine, her friends, her sense of normalcy. Everything that had made her feel secure was being systematically stripped away. The custody hearing was moved up to emergency status. Judge Patricia Morrison, again, no relation to any of the other Morrison in our case, was known for her strict approach to child welfare cases. She listened impassionately as Veronica's attorney, Richard Blackstone himself, painted me as a dangerous drug user who had managed to deceive everyone until being caught. "Your Honor, this arrest validates every concern my client has raised about her daughter's living environment. Ms. Chen-Morrison has demonstrated a pattern of deception, hiding her substance abuse while caring for a vulnerable child. The fact that drugs were found in the vehicle she uses to transport the child to school shows a reckless disregard for the child's safety." Patricia fought back hard. "Your Honor, my client maintains her complete innocence of these charges. The timing of this alleged discovery is highly suspicious, coming just weeks before the custody evaluation. We believe someone planted evidence in her vehicle to manufacture exactly this scenario." "That's a serious accusation, Counselor," Judge Morrison said. "Do you have any proof of evidence tampering?" "We're conducting forensic analysis now, Your Honor, but until such proof exists, this court must prioritize the child's immediate safety. Given the arrest for controlled substances, I'm granting temporary emergency custody to the biological mother, pending resolution of the criminal charges." Emma's scream when they told her she was leaving with Veronica will haunt me forever. She clung to me with superhuman strength, begging not to go with the stranger lady, not understanding why the adults she trusted were forcing her into this situation. "I want my mama," she sobbed as Veronica's court-appointed escort peeled her away from me. "I want to go home. Mama, don't let them take me." "I love you, Emma. I love you so much. This isn't goodbye. I'll see you soon." But as I watched them drive away with my daughter, I wondered if I was lying. Veronica had won the first major battle, and she'd done it by playing a game I didn't even know existed until it was too late. That night, David and I sat in Emma's empty bedroom, surrounded by her toys and drawings, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The silence was deafening. No bedtime stories, no requests for water, no little feet padding across the hallway. She planned this, I said finally. Veronica planned every bit of this. The timing, the location, even the amount of cocaine. Just enough to create a scandal, but not enough for serious prison time. But how? How did she get drugs into your car without you knowing? I thought about my routine, my predictable schedule, the places I parked regularly. The grocery store, the preschool parking lot. My car sits unlocked for minutes at a time while I'm loading Emma or talking to other parents. It wouldn't take long. The realization that someone had been watching us, studying our patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy us, made me feel violated in ways I couldn't articulate. Veronica hadn't just taken Emma, she'd shattered our sense of safety, our belief that goodness and truth would ultimately prevail. We were at the lowest point we'd ever been, and Emma was gone. The fight for our family had become a fight for our survival, and we were losing badly. The setup was complete, and I was trapped in its web with no idea how to escape.
The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Emma herself. 3 weeks after being removed from our home, she was scheduled for a supervised visit at the Denver Family Justice Center. The sterile meeting room with its institutional furniture and observation cameras felt nothing like the warm spaces where we'd built our relationship. But seeing Emma again made my heart soar and break simultaneously. She looked smaller somehow. Her usual bright energy dimmed to a cautious weariness. When she saw me, she ran into my arms with desperate intensity, clinging to me like I might disappear again at any moment. "Mama, when can I come home?" she whispered against my neck. "I don't like it at the strange lady's house. She doesn't know how to make pancakes right, and she gets mad when I cry." The supervised visit monitor, a stern woman named Janet Phillips, took notes on our every interaction, but I focused entirely on Emma. During our 2 allotted hours together, she drew pictures and told me stories about her new living situation that made my blood boil. The strange lady, Emma still refused to call Veronica Mom or Mommy, she has a big man friend who smells funny. He told me not to tell anyone about the time they had white powder on the table and laughed a lot. I glanced at Janet Phillips, wondering if she'd caught the significance of Emma's innocent revelation, but she seemed more focused on documenting whether Emma was showing signs of trauma from living with me, rather than listening to what she was actually saying. After the visit, I immediately called Patricia with Emma's statement. She mentioned seeing white powder at Veronica's place. Given that cocaine was allegedly found in my car, "We need to be very careful here," Patricia warned. "Using a 4-year-old's statements as evidence is tricky, and they'll argue that you coached her to say these things. But it does suggest that Veronica and Richard Blackstone have access to cocaine, which could support our planting theory." The real breakthrough came 2 days later when Marcus Thompson, our private investigator, called with urgent news. "I've been monitoring Veronica's social media and public activities. She made a mistake." Marcus had discovered that Veronica had posted Instagram stories during the exact time frame when the cocaine was allegedly planted in my car. The posts showed herself at a Denver spa called Serenity Springs, less than 3 miles from Emma's preschool, on the Tuesday before the Thursday morning raid. "The timestamps are crucial," Marcus explained during our emergency meeting. "She posted a story at 10:23 a.m. showing herself getting a massage at Serenity Springs. The preschool parking lot where your car was parked that morning is a 7-minute drive from that spa. But the real smoking gun was in the spa security footage. Marcus had convinced the manager to review their parking lot cameras for that Tuesday morning. The footage showed Veronica arriving at 9:45 a.m. and leaving at 11:30 a.m., but there was a gap. She left the spa premises for approximately 45 minutes during her appointment time. The timestamp shows her vehicle leaving the spa parking lot at 10:35 a.m. and returning at 11:20 a.m. That's more than enough time to drive to the preschool, plant evidence in your car, and return. The spa appointment itself was another piece of the puzzle. According to the records Marcus obtained, Veronica had booked a 90-minute massage package, but had actually been present for only about half that time.
She had paid in cash and claimed a family emergency required her to step out briefly. The spa employees remember her because she was agitated when she returned. She seemed nervous, kept checking her phone, and left immediately after her abbreviated treatment instead of using their relaxation area like most clients do. Armed with this evidence, Patricia filed an emergency motion to compel forensic analysis of the planted cocaine. She said, "We're not just claiming evidence tampering anymore. We have a timeline, opportunity, and physical proof that Veronica was in the area when the planting occurred." The forensic analysis took another week, but the results were everything we'd hoped for and more. The cocaine bag contained 3 distinct sets of fingerprints. Mine, from when I'd handled it after the officers found it, an unidentified set that likely belonged to one of the officers, and most importantly, a clear thumbprint that belonged to Veronica Castillo. Dr. Anda Foster, the forensic expert Patricia hired, explained the significance during our strategy meeting. The thumbprint placement on the interior of the baggie suggests direct handling during the packaging process. It's not a print that could have been transferred inadvertently. Someone with those fingerprints deliberately placed cocaine inside that bag. But Veronica's team was prepared for this development. Richard Blackstone immediately filed countermotions claiming the forensic evidence was compromised and suggesting that I had somehow obtained an item with Veronica's fingerprints and transferred them to the drug bag myself. "It's a desperate argument," Patricia said, "but we need to be prepared for them to fight dirty. They're going to claim everything from evidence contamination to elaborate frame-up scenarios that paint you as the real mastermind."
The turning point came when Marcus uncovered Veronica's phone records through legal discovery. Her cell phone had pinged the tower closest to Emma's preschool at exactly 10:47 a.m. on the Tuesday in question, right in the middle of her supposed spa appointment. More damaging was a text message exchange between Veronica and Richard Blackstone from that same morning. At 10:52 a.m., Veronica had texted, "Package delivered as discussed." Blackstone's response, sent 3 minutes later, read, "Perfect timing, everything is in motion." When confronted with these messages during deposition, both Veronica and Blackstone claimed they were discussing a legal brief delivery. But the timing was too perfect, the language too suspicious, and combined with all the other evidence, it painted a clear picture of conspiracy. The case began shifting dramatically in our favor when Dr. Chen testified about Emma's statements during their therapy sessions. Emma had consistently described feeling scared and confused in Veronica's home, had mentioned seeing adults use white powder that made them act funny, and had expressed desperate desire to return to what she called her real home with David and me. "In my professional opinion," Dr. Chen told the court, "Emma's statements show no indication of coaching or manipulation. Her descriptions are consistent with a child reporting actual experiences, and her emotional responses align with someone who has been removed from a stable, loving environment and placed in an unfamiliar, potentially chaotic one." The judge ordered an immediate investigation into Veronica's household, including surprise visits and drug testing for all adults in the home. The results were explosive. Both Veronica and Richard Blackstone tested positive for cocaine use, and investigators found drug paraphernalia hidden in their master bedroom. Emma was immediately removed from Veronica's custody and placed in temporary foster care while the investigation continued. It wasn't the reunion I'd hoped for, but it was progress. At least she was no longer in an environment where adults were actively using drugs. The final piece of evidence came from an unlikely source, Richard Blackstone's law firm. Facing potential criminal charges and disciplinary action from the state bar, one of his junior associates came forward with information about the scheme. Blackstone bragged about it, the associate told investigators. He said he'd found the perfect way to discredit the stepmother and guarantee his girlfriend would win custody. He called it manufacturing reasonable doubt about her character and seemed proud of how clever the timing was. The associate provided recordings of office conversations where Blackstone discussed the plan in detail, including his strategy for using Emma's emotional trauma as evidence of instability in our home.
When all this evidence was presented to Judge Morrison, her reaction was swift and decisive. This court has rarely seen such a calculated attempt to manipulate the judicial system, she said. The evidence clearly shows a conspiracy to plant evidence, commit perjury, and traumatize a child for personal gain. Criminal charges were filed against both Veronica and Richard Blackstone. The custody case was dismissed entirely, with the judge noting that Veronica's actions had demonstrated such poor judgment and regard for Emma's welfare that supervised visitation would be the maximum contact allowed going forward. But the real victory was smaller and more personal. When Patricia called to tell me that Emma would be returned to our custody immediately, I broke down crying in our empty kitchen, the same kitchen where this nightmare had begun with a police search and where it was finally ending with a phone call that brought our daughter home. Emma would need therapy, we would need time to heal, and there would be legal consequences to sort through for months to come. But the truth had finally emerged from beneath all the lies and manipulation. The evidence didn't just prove my innocence, it revealed the depths of Veronica's desperation and vindictiveness. She had been willing to traumatize her own biological daughter, destroy multiple lives, and corrupt the legal system itself, all to satisfy her need for control and revenge. Justice was coming, but more importantly, Emma was coming home.
Emma's homecoming was nothing like the joyful reunion I'd imagined during those dark weeks of separation. When the social worker brought her to our front door on a gray October afternoon, she clung to my hand with trembling fingers, her eyes darting nervously around our familiar living room as if seeing it for the first time. "Is it really okay for me to stay?" she whispered as we sat together on her bed, surrounded by the toys and books that had waited patiently for her return. "Nobody's going to take me away again?" "Never," I promised, though I knew it would take time for her to believe it. "You're home now, and you're safe." The criminal trial of Veronica Castillo and Richard Blackstone became a media sensation that stretched across 3 months. Denver's newspapers followed every detail of what they dubbed the custody conspiracy case, with headlines like "Attorney's elaborate frame-up plot exposed" and "Mother plants drugs to steal child." The attention was overwhelming, but it also served our purposes. Every day of coverage reinforced the truth of what had happened to us. Testifying against Veronica was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Sitting in that courtroom, facing the woman who had nearly destroyed our family, required every ounce of strength I possessed. But when the prosecutor asked me to describe the moment I was arrested in front of Emma, when I had to relive watching my daughter scream as strangers forced her into a car, my voice grew steady and strong. "She didn't just try to frame me for drug possession," I told the jury. "She used a 4-year-old child as a weapon." Emma was traumatized not just by being separated from her family, but by being placed in an unstable environment where adults were actively using the same drugs they planted in my car. Every decision Veronica made prioritized her desire for revenge over Emma's well-being. The defense tried to paint me as vindictive, suggesting I was exaggerating Emma's trauma to make Veronica look worse. But Dr. Chen's testimony demolished that narrative. She described Emma's ongoing nightmares, her regression in potty training, her anxiety attacks whenever she heard sirens or saw police officers. "This child has been severely impacted by the defendant's actions," Dr. Chen explained to the jury. "The forced separation from her primary attachment figures, combined with placement in an unstable environment where she witnessed drug use, has created trauma that will require months or possibly years of therapy to resolve." Marcus Thompson's investigation had uncovered even more evidence during the criminal proceedings. Bank records showed that Veronica had withdrawn $2,000 in cash the day before planting the drugs, money that likely paid for the cocaine and any accomplices who might have helped with the setup.
Her internet search history revealed extensive research on drug laws, custody procedures, and even tutorials on avoiding fingerprints when handling evidence. She Googled how to plant evidence without getting caught 17 times in the 2 weeks before the setup. She also researched the specific amount of cocaine that would result in misdemeanor rather than felony charges, suggesting she wanted to create maximum legal trouble without risking a sentence that might generate too much sympathy from Miss Chen-Morrison. The most damaging testimony came from Richard Blackstone's former associate, Jennifer Walsh, who had initially been reluctant to come forward, but ultimately couldn't live with her knowledge of the conspiracy. She described office conversations where Blackstone had boasted about his plan to eliminate the stepmother problem and detailed how he'd coached Veronica on creating a believable timeline for the evidence planting. Mr. Blackstone said family court judges always err on the side of caution when children's safety is involved, Walsh testified. He believed that even false drug allegations would be enough to remove Emma from Miss Chen-Morrison's custody, and that once custody changed, it would be nearly impossible to reverse. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Veronica was convicted of evidence tampering, child endangerment, conspiracy, and perjury. Richard Blackstone faced additional charges related to his abuse of the legal system and his professional responsibilities as an attorney. Judge Harrison, who presided over the criminal trial, didn't mince words during sentencing. This case represents one of the most callous manipulations of both the legal system and a vulnerable child that this court has ever encountered. The defendants showed complete disregard for the psychological welfare of a 4-year-old in pursuit of personal vendetta and professional advancement. Veronica received 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation with no unsupervised contact with Emma. Richard Blackstone got 2 years in prison and permanent disbarment. More importantly for our family's future, the judge issued a permanent restraining order preventing either of them from initiating any legal action related to Emma's custody for a minimum of 10 years. The civil lawsuit we filed against both conspirators resulted in a settlement that covered all our legal expenses, Emma's ongoing therapy costs, and established a trust fund for her college education. But money was never the point. We wanted legal protection and official acknowledgement of what they had put us through.
Emma's healing process was gradual and sometimes heartbreaking. She had developed what Dr. Chen called hypervigilance around authority figures, becoming anxious whenever she saw police officers, social workers, or anyone in official capacity. Simple activities like grocery shopping became complicated when she would panic if we encountered security guards or anyone in uniform. Her sleep was disrupted for months by nightmares about being taken away again. She would wake up screaming, running to our bedroom to make sure David and I were still there. We moved a small cot into our room so she could sleep nearby when the anxiety was particularly bad. But there were breakthroughs too. The first time she laughed spontaneously at one of David's silly jokes, we both teared up. When she asked if we could plant a garden for next year instead of just this summer, it showed she was beginning to believe in the permanence of our family again. When she started building elaborate block castles again instead of just defensive walls, Dr. Chen noted it as a significant sign of emotional healing. The school district welcomed Emma back with extraordinary sensitivity. Mrs. Williams, the principal, had followed our case in the news and arranged for Emma to have access to the school counselor whenever needed. Her preschool teacher, Miss Rodriguez, created special activities to help Emma rebuild her confidence and sense of security. She's gradually becoming the child she was before, Miss Rodriguez told us during a conference 6 months after Emma's return. She's participating in group activities again, showing leadership during playtime, and most importantly, she's talking about future plans. That forward thinking is a crucial indicator of emotional recovery. Our neighborhood relationships healed more slowly.
Some neighbors, like Mrs. Patterson, were deeply apologetic once the truth came out. She brought us homemade cookies and flowers, expressing shame about how quickly she'd believed the worst about me. "I should have known better," she said. "You were always such a devoted mother to Emma." Others remained distant, perhaps embarrassed by their quick judgment or uncomfortable with the reminder that they'd been so wrong about people they'd known for years. A few families moved away entirely, and while I'd like to think it was unrelated to our situation, the timing suggested otherwise. David and I emerged from the ordeal with a stronger marriage, but also a deeper understanding of how fragile security can be. We talked more openly about our fears, made more deliberate choices about protecting Emma's privacy, and developed a network of trusted friends who had supported us throughout the crisis. I keep thinking about how different our lives would be if that fingerprint analysis hadn't revealed the truth, David said one evening as we watched Emma play in the backyard garden we'd finally planted. If Veronica had been more careful about leaving evidence. But she wasn't careful, I replied. Arrogant people always make mistakes eventually. She was so confident in her plan that she didn't consider how many ways it could backfire. Emma, now 5 and starting kindergarten, still showed signs of what she'd been through. She asked more questions about where I was going when I left the house, needed more reassurance about pickup times, and had developed a habit of introducing me to new people as my real mama to make sure there was no confusion about our relationship. But she was healing. She was laughing again, making friends, planning elaborate art projects that covered our refrigerator in colorful chaos. She talked about becoming a teacher, like Mama, and building houses like Daddy helps design for work. She was thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present. The legal ordeal officially ended 8 months after Veronica's arrest, but in many ways, our real victory was quieter and more personal. It was Emma falling asleep easily in her own bed, David and I having dinner conversations about normal things like vacation plans and home repairs, the return of our Sunday pancake tradition without fear that someone might use it against us. One evening, as I was tucking Emma into bed, she asked me a question that showed how much she'd processed about what happened. "Mama, why did the strange lady try to hurt our family?" I chose my words carefully, wanting to give her an age-appropriate explanation without vilifying her biological mother entirely. Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices when they're angry or scared. It doesn't make those choices okay, but it helps us understand that it wasn't really about you or our family. She was feeling bad inside, and instead of getting help, she decided to hurt other people. But she can't hurt us anymore, right? Right, she can't hurt us anymore. We're safe and we're together, and that's what matters. As I turned off Emma's light and watched her drift off to peaceful sleep, I reflected on everything we'd survived. Veronica's elaborate plot had nearly succeeded. She had come frighteningly close to permanently destroying our family through manipulation of the legal system and exploitation of natural biases about drug use and parenting fitness. But truth had ultimately prevailed, justice had been served, and most importantly, Emma was home where she belonged. The fingerprint analysis that revealed Veronica's setup not only proved my innocence, it exposed the depths of calculation and callousness behind the entire conspiracy. Our story became a cautionary tale about the vulnerabilities in the family court system, but it was also proof that with persistence, good legal representation, and a little bit of luck, even the most sophisticated frame-up could be exposed. Emma Chen-Morrison was safe, loved, and home. And that was the only victory that truly mattered.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.